Good evening, everyone. My name is Sydney Yeager, and I'm the Senior Public Programs Producer here at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's program, Spiegelman's Mouse and Podwal's Lamentations with Richard McBee. Here at the museum, we are dedicated to the crucial mission of educating our diverse community about Jewish life and heritage before, during, and after the Holocaust. As part of that mission, our programs illuminate the stories of survivors, broader histories of hate and anti-Semitism, stories of resistance against injustice, and more. Thank you so much for joining us today virtually. We hope that if you are able to, you will visit the museum in person to see our current and upcoming exhibitions, including Art of Freedom, the life and work of Arthur Szyk, which is now open. It just opened on Sunday. Closed captions are available on today's program, and instructions on how to turn captions on or off are posted in the chat. If you have questions for our speaker during the program, please put them in the Zoom Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the hour. Again, that's the Zoom Q&A box and not the chat. Today, we are very honored to be joined by Richard McBee. Richard is a painter of biblical subject matter and writer on Jewish art. From 2000 until 2014, he wrote about the Jewish arts for the Jewish Press and continues to exhibit paintings, lecture, and curate Jewish art exhibitions. He's a founding member of JewishArtSalon.org. He recently published a monograph on Soltes, Living Jewish Art, which there's a link to in the chat. YouTube.com features many of his lectures, and his website, richardmcbee.com, exhibits over 300 of his artworks and 250 of his Jewish art reviews. So I highly recommend you also check out that website and check out the link for the book as well. So thank you so much for joining us, and now I'm going to hand things over to Richard.
Thank you so much, Sydney. So welcome to my last lecture in this series on Jewish art. That was commissioned by the Museum of Jewish Heritage as an introduction to the Art of Freedom, the life and work of Arthur Szyk. And so I thank them very much for actually inviting me to lecture here. My previous lectures, The Birth of Jewish Art, Jewish Identity in American Art, and the last one was The Radical Camera, are all now available on YouTube. They set the stage in an odd sort of way for the subjects that we have tonight. And the three subjects are Lamentations, the Book of Lamentations, with illustrations by Mark Podwal, Mouse by Art Spiegelman, and another one that wasn't listed, a short little book illustrated by Mark Podwal and written by Francine Prose. The name of that is You Never Know. And so let's try to make some sense of all of this. I've got three words for you: memory, mourning, and justice. So let's start with the Book of Lamentations. Okay, so it was likely composed more than 2,600 years ago, and which was soon after the utter destruction of the kingdom of Judah, meaning and the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem. The prophet Jeremiah is the author. In 1974, Mark Podwal, noted author, illustrator, and physician, as we've mentioned him in previous lectures, he did 28 black and white illustrations on the Book of Lamentations. And quite frankly, they are more like reflections on it. They're not illustrations. They're reflections on certain portions of the book. We're going to examine, though, only 4 of his illustrations. Those are the ones that actually interest me the most. And also, we don't have that much time. So this is, though, in terms of Podwal's work, one of the angriest of all of his many books. It's also kind of old. It's from 1974. He continued working until his demise in 2024. And so we'll see something unusual here. Now, what his illustrations do, they utilize, though, existing works of art, many of these that I'm showing you, to extend his metaphorical reach. Podwal has kept Jeremiah's alphabetical acrostic, with each chapter containing 22 sets of lines reflecting the Aleph to Tav, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Now, according to the Gemara, why were they, meaning the Jewish people, punished with an alphabetical dirge? Because they violated the Torah, which was given by means of that same alphabet, reflecting the tragic reality that the Jews of his time transgressed the Torah from Aleph to Tav, from beginning to end. It's a tragic memory. The first illustration I want to show you is on the verse, "Remember, O Lord, what has come upon us. Behold and see our reproach. Our inheritance is turned over to strangers, our houses unto aliens." So what do we see here? We see a vicious beast gazing at us. It's holding an 18th century Polish menorah in its teeth. And the beast is irreverently wearing a Torah crown. The Midrash comments that quote, "our inheritance" refers to the temple. Podwal's illustration shows the ornaments of our synagogues, a beautiful menorah and a Torah crown, all tragically plundered. But what is that beast? It is the iconic Capitoline wolf, nursing Romulus and Remus, the mythical founders of Rome. This is a medieval bronze sculpture of the she-wolf with the boys underneath her, nursing. And this terrifying pagan image represents the cruel Roman conqueror making off with the symbols of our pillaged faith. Podwal's model, of course, again, as I said, is the she-wolf, same head of the Capitoline wolf. Our inheritance is turned over to strangers. To the beast of the Roman enemy. So the next illustration that Mark Podwal did was based upon this image. "You have seen, O Lord, the wrong done to me. Grant me justice. You have seen all their vindictiveness, all their schemes against me." And again, that's from the Book of Lamentations. So Podwal reminds us of the fanatical Inquisition faced by the Spanish Jews. It produced untold suffering and terror. The Inquisition was only for, though, Spanish Christians. But then it especially preyed upon newly converted Jews and Muslims suspected of secretly practicing their old faith. The methods of spying and intimidation and torture led to harsh imprisonment, forced confessions, and frequent execution by being burnt at the stake. The infamous auto da fe, a public ritual procession of accusation, humiliation, and finally execution by burning. The Inquisition was under the administration of the Grand Inquisitor, Torquemada, and that was in the 15th century. He was the most notorious, especially known for his hatred of the Jews. He had a central role in the expulsion from Spain of the Jews. Many more Grand Inquisitors followed after him, including the one pictured here, Cardinal Don Fernando Nino de Guerra, who was painted by El Greco in the year 1600. The Grand Inquisitor, arrayed in his ecclesiastical garments, is the epitome of church power. His black glasses frame a serious and determined face, too accustomed to cruelty. Podwal's Inquisitor is defined by the robes of his office, and just like his oversized hands, emphasize his reach into Jewish lives. Quote, "You have seen, O Lord, the wrong done to me." The next illustration is based upon this of a floundering ship. Ships are so often seen as positive symbols of exploration and hope and prosperity. However, for Podwal, Lamentations takes on the voice of the 16th century Spanish Jews. Ships in this image were the tragic means of exile from their homeland. As we see in the frontispiece of the 1533, over here, sorry, a 1533 Ferrara Bible, the floundering galleon, its center mast broken, became the symbol of the Spanish Jews in exile. You can see the mast split is in this larger image also. So the Ferrara Bible was a 1553 as a publication in Judeo-Spanish, meaning Ladino, of the Hebrew Bible used by Sephardi Jews. This Ladino translation was largely paid for by Gracia Mendes Nasi, a 16th century philanthropist, entrepreneur, and banker. She was evidently the wealthiest woman in Europe at the time. She set up extensive escape networks to save hundreds of crypto Jews fleeing persecution. She established one of the first Jewish printing presses in the Ottoman Empire and was an important patron of Jewish communities in Constantinople and actually financed the city of Tiberias to become a safe haven for Jewish refugees. What a woman and what a contribution. And so what's this got to do with Podwal? They have heard that I groan. There is none to comfort me. All my enemies have heard of my trouble and are glad. But it was you, meaning you, God, who did it. The passage to exile was defined by the ship, combining its very real hardships with the realization that there would be no return home. While the Ferrara Bible image represents nothing but the pain of loss, Podwal's ship sees the hope of saving their unique Torah and bringing it to new shores in it to spread its exceptional learning. Nestled in the foredecks, if you see here, nestled in the foredecks, you see, in fact, the Sephardi teak. It actually fits as the primary passenger in this modern understanding of the tragedy of Spanish Jewry. Between the image and text, there is hope of a Torah future in spite of the bitter pain of exile and the home destroyed. You see here, even Podwal has, so make sure you understand, this is the law of Moses here. The next illustration. The adversary has spread out his hand upon all her treasures, for she has seen that the nations have entered into her sanctuary. Much to our horror, the infamy of our punishment was indeed matched in the Holocaust. Jeremiah's dirge addresses that tragedy equally well, and Podwal's image, shockingly, links the two events as stormtroopers march in goose step, carrying the temple menorah from the Arch of Titus. Here the image reverberates with tragedy. This is a subject that transcends time. The Arch of Titus, constructed in 81 of the Common Era, after the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. For close to 1900 years, no greater image of infamy existed for the Jewish people. The arch itself, planted in the heart of imperial and then Catholic Rome, its central image of the golden menorah pillaged from the temple. The menorah was paraded through the Roman Forum. It existed as an open wound in the Jewish soul. We've spoken about this before, if you remember, in the beginning of Jewish art. The adversary has spread out his hand upon all her treasures, for she has seen that the nations have entered into her sanctuary, again from Lamentations. So Podwal's last image, the very end of the Book of Lamentations, he has a hand spread out, pleading, but with hope. He ends the Book of Lamentations with this dedication to say the Book of Lamentations is dedicated to the endurance of Jerusalem. For Podwal, he certainly did not give up hope. Intermission. Well, I would love to go to something more cheerful, but we're actually going to go deeper. Mark Podwal has shown us how contemporary Jewish art can use an ancient text to address and explore contemporary themes, such as national and religious anti-Semitism and forced exile and oppression. Art Spiegelman's Mouse brings us into the horror of the 20th century. the Holocaust, and the complexity, though, of personal Jewish memory. This is about mourning. Art Spiegelman's Mouse, A Survivor's Tale, is an important rupture in survivor testimony. It's a narrative of survivor testimony through the lens of an adult child of a survivor. It's an early example of the graphic novel and a totally different than simple testimony. Mouse is a 2-volume work of close to 1,500 comic book images that was published in 1992 after 13 years of drawing, interviews, and research. It's the story of Art Spiegelman, who is the author and the artist, recording his own father and coming to terms with the memories of his father, Vladek, and about the Holocaust and his life before, during, and after, and right up to the present. Mouse is essentially Art Spiegelman's extended act of mourning for both parents and, by extension, the inherent difficulties and barriers to memory and commemoration. It is easily the most difficult and confounding Jewish artwork that I have seen. As I said, it's 2 volumes. Volume 1, My Father Bleeds History. Volume 2, And Here My Troubles Began. Volume 1 begins shockingly with a quote from Adolf Hitler. Quote, "The Jews are undoubtedly a race, but they are not human." Quote Hitler. This provides Spiegelman, though, provides Spiegelman's rationale to use mice to represent the Jews, subverting the Nazi image of Jews as vermin by adopting it, as many minorities adopt similar vilifications, as a badge of honor. Spiegelman cast the Germans as cats, the natural enemies of mice, the Poles as pigs, and the Americans as good-natured dogs. In chapter 1, Artie is an adult who visits his father in Rego Park and quickly demands that his father tell his story about his life in Poland and the war. Vladek, on an exercise bicycle, begins the story of his life in Poland before the war. The central frame of the page shows Vladek on the bike. The tattooed number on his arm is just visible. The story continues of Vladek's early marriage to Artie's mother, Anja, and his textile business in Poland. The rise of the Nazis is glimpsed as he is drafted into, though he remembers in Poland, into the Polish army in 1939. Suddenly, Vladek digresses with an oft-repeated story of how he now has cataracts. Remember, he's an old man now in Rego Park. And then recently he was operated on to implant a glass eye. It's all about sight and seeing, or not. And then, though, the story continues. And actually, he's then captured by the Nazis and he's put into a prisoner of war camp. Vladek describes the harsh regime of the camp, interjecting that every day I bathed and did gymnastics to keep strong. And every day we prayed. I was very religious, and it wasn't what else to do, he says. This religiosity comes out of nowhere. The page shifts between the war camp, his dreams of his grandfather's prophecy, and back to Rego Park, and back to the prisoner camp. You see, he's dreaming here. Here is an image of his grandfather who, as it were, in his dream, tells him that you will come out of this place free on the day of Pasha's Truma. Pasha's Truma. And so, you see, we're back here in Rego Park. So what's Pasha's Truma, he exclaims. Each way on Saturday, we read a section from the Torah. And this is so-called a Pasha. And 1 week each year, it's Pasha's Truma. And so later on, as you see on the bottom of the page, He asks, well, he's back in the work camp. And he asks somebody, what's Parshas Truma? Well, it's in the middle of February, almost 3 months from now, another prisoner tells him. Oh, I told him my dream. Let's hope it's true. I'm afraid we'll never get out of here. You see, the chapter ends back in the family home in Rego Park, Queens, with Vladek impulsively throwing Artie's only coat into the garbage. His father's puzzling action simply adds to the discord within their relationship. The narrative continues. Now, I just want to interject. As I said, there's close to, what did I say, 1,500 images in this? I'm only showing you a few. And I'm not actually going to tell you all the various narrative loops. I've made a list of them, i.e., there's something like, 9 separate narratives here in Mouse. I'm just touching on a few of them, so just get a taste of it. But the fact is that it goes back and forth between the past, before the war, the Holocaust that he lives through, and then his life now, his life when he first got home from Europe, from the camps, and his first wife and his second wife, and then Artie's wife. It goes on and on. So it continues showing Vladek and Anja forced into the ghetto, then fleeing as fugitives and finally captured and deported to Auschwitz. Years later, back in Rego Park, the final revelation that Vladek has in his confusion and grief over the suicide of Archie's mother has burned her memories. That was too much. That was too much for Archie. So here he's discussing this whole event, and he discusses it with actually his father. How could you burn her memoir? You murderer. How the hell could you do such a thing? That's Archie accusing his father of what he did. And then a friend. It's constantly shifting. He's with a friend now. And his friend is saying, you can't talk to your father like that. It's not right. And finally, it's too much for him. He leaves his friend in the bottom here, and he's walking away, and he's saying about his father. In the last frame of part 1, he walks away from his father's house, muttering a terrible curse, perhaps the ultimate fracture of memory. Murderer. The unstable core of both volumes emerges at the beginning of part 2. And here my troubles began. That's the beginning of the second volume. In the first chapter, a 14-page narrative set in the Catskills exposes the complexities of Artie's relationship with his wife, Francoise, and his haunted dreams of, quote, my ghost brother, Richelieu. Then this morphs into an extended description of his father, Vladek's hellish life in Auschwitz. Suddenly the scene shifts back to the Catskills many years later, and how Vladek sneaks into the Pines Hotel, guests only, with Archie to play bingo. Chapter 2 then begins with Auschwitz, Time Flies, and that's what this last image is here. It reaches a climax of anxiety in an unbearable abridgment of survivor testimony, painful contrast with contemporary life, and the relentless process of creating what you're seeing here, Mouse. Notice the mask on Archie's face. It's a mouse mask, and the flies buzzing around. So here, the first page of this part 2 depicts Spiegelman slumped at his drawing table, reflecting Vladek died of congestive heart failure on August 18th, 1982. In May 1987, Francoise and I are expecting a baby. Between May 16th, 1944 and May 24th, 1944, over 100,000 Hungarian Jews were gassed in Auschwitz. And in September 1986, after 8 years of work, the first part of Mouse was published. It was a critical and commercial success. And In May 1968, my mother killed herself. She left no note. He says, lately, I've been feeling depressed. The flies buzz around his head as the last panel on the page reveals him sitting amid piles of exterminated mice. It's clear that there is more than one survivor in this tale. Spiegelman's Mouse, A Survivor's Tale, achieves the ultimate dislocation on the final page. At the end, there is the tale of how Wlodek survives the camps. He returns to Poland to successfully find his wife, Anja. He proclaims here, he's in Poland, they're brought together, Anja, Anja, my Anja. More I don't need to tell you. We were both very happy and lived happy ever after. As he rests his head on the pillow by addressing Artie as his dead son, Rishu, the child that was actually a victim of the Holocaust, Wlodek spreads the victimhood beyond the survivors to their descendants. The act has enormous resonance. The recognition that we are all victims, at least in an existential sense, is utterly exhausting and demanding a certain kind of silence of the stories. This silence is necessary for life to be allowed to go on, but paradoxically, the silence cannot be permitted because we understand that the future must be inoculated by the memory of the past. Holocaust memory, the irreducible core of Holocaust history, has been transformed in Mouse into Holocaust art. This process has, I think, two possible consequences. It can signal a kind of desperation, an acknowledgement that with the passing of the last of the survivors, we will no longer be able to speak with authority about what may be the defining event of the 20th century. Or Mouse may signal that it is exactly within this new modality of Holocaust art that we are able to address the complex and painful realities concerning the Holocaust, inconceivable within the description of mere history. As with most mourning, though, there is no easy answer. And here we see on the tombstone of Wlodek and Anja, we see them, one dying in 1982 and one dying in 1968, and Art Spiegelman essentially putting his name here from 1978 to 1971. So we need to catch our breath. So we have traversed the historical memory of Mark Podwal's Lamentations, and then the rough and uncertain fields of recent mourning of Spiegelman's Mouse. Now, though, we lift our eyes to a legend of hope, the legend of the 36 righteous individuals. You never know is the most hopeful Jewish artwork for this evening. And it is about, at the end of the day, justice. We'll see. The Lamed Vavniks, 36 righteous individuals, whom it says in the Talmud, quote, that the world has no fewer than 36 righteous people in each generation who greet the divine presence, as it is said in the Pasuk, happy are all who wait for him. The word him in Hebrew, Lamed Vav, is 36. According to this teaching, in Kabbalah, at any given time, there are at least 36 holy persons in the world who are tzaddikim. These holy people are hidden, meaning no one knows who they are, and in fact, they themselves may not know who they are. For the sake of these 36 hidden saints, God preserves the world, even if the rest of the world doesn't deserve it. The fact that, in the merit of these 36, God preserves the whole world, that is the paradigm of divine justice. So I'm going to read you a story. This is the story in the book. I'm not going to print it all out here. You'll have to follow me, and some of the images will jump, but you'll see. So this is, of course, the story. This is written by Francine Prose. And for 40 days and 40 nights, no rain fell on the town of Plotchnik. Every green thing turned brown, and a dry wind rattled the branches. The thirsty cows stopped giving milk. Fish circled the shallow, muddy puddle that was once a deep, cold lake. In the synagogue, the rabbi prayed, Lord of the universe, favor us with rain. Not a drop of rain fell. The rich man prayed the same prayer. Not a trickle. The teacher, the doctor, the lawyer, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker prayed. Not one wispy cloud appeared in the clear blue sky. Just in case you don't know, this, of course, is the rabbi praying. He's at the bima, right at the very front of the synagogue with the two candles and an image of the Ten Commandments in front of him and the crown of Torah. So suddenly, a little voice, maybe I should pray, came a meek voice from the back of the synagogue. It was Shmuel. It was Shmuel the shoemaker. Oh. Huh. It was Shmuel. Poor Shmuel. They called him poor, stupid Shmuel. They called him secretly, because he often forgot to charge his customers for fixing their shoes. And if he forgot to pay Shmuel forgot to ask. When a beggar came through town, Shmuel gave him free shoes. Once, when a fierce bear appeared in the streets, everyone hid in their houses. Stupid Shmuel gave the bear water, and the bear went back to the woods. Whenever there was trouble, somehow Shmuel was magically always right there, ready to help, smiling and singing to himself. No one cared if poor Shmuel prayed. If God ignored the town elders, why would he listen to Shmuel, who couldn't even read the prayers? What did he pray? He said, please, God, send rain. Prayed poor Shmuel. Thunder grumbled in the distance, and the sky turned black as coal. Raindrops tapped the roofs, and people ran out with their heads tilted back, catching the drops in their mouths. We prayed for rain, and God listened, said the rabbi, the rich man, the teacher, the doctor, the lawyer, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. Poor Shmuel, he said nothing. Smiling and singing to himself, he went home to his tumble-down cobbler shop. It rained. It rained for 40 days and nights. Soon the cows and the fish were swimming through the streets. Water climbed all the way up to the steps of the synagogue, where now the people of Plotchnik prayed. They prayed for the rain to stop. Lord of the universe, prayed the rabbi, take back your generous gifts. The wind howled. The rain drove sideways against the windows. The rich man, the lawyer, the doctor, the teacher, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker prayed with the rabbi. Lightning crackled in the sky, and the cold wind blew out the lamps and the candles. Well, what do you think? In the dark, though, they heard Shmuel pray. Please, God, make it stop raining. All at once, the rain stopped, the sun came out, and no one left the synagogue. They just stayed there, blinking, staring at Shmuel. And Shmuel, smiling and singing to himself, went home to his tumble-down cobbler shop. After he was gone, the people said, "Why does God listen to poor Shmuel and not to us?" I'll think about it, said the rabbi. That night, the rabbi had a dream. He dreamed of menorahs with 36 candles. He dreamed he saw a door in the sky, bordered by 36 stars. And when he walked through the door, he saw a magnificent feast. 36 men sat at the banquet table, all of them dressed in white, their faces radiant with light. And who was sitting at the head of the table? Poor Shmuel. Suddenly the rabbi understood why Shmuel's prayers had made the rain stop. And now he knew that Shmuel had made the rain start as well. In the morning, the rabbi rushed to the synagogue and he called the people together and listen, he cried, our own poor Shmuel is one of the holy Lamed Vavniks. What? Asked the butcher. The 36 righteous people, said the rabbi. How many? Asked the baker. 36, said the rabbi. The 36 who? Asked the candlestick maker. Lamed Vavniks, repeated the rabbi. The rabbi continued. An ancient legend tells us that, scattered throughout the world, there live 36 of these holy people. No one knows who they are, and many of them are humble and poor and ragged, homeless wanderers. And yet these people are so good, so kind, so just, and righteous. They have God's ear. The world could not get along without them. So much depends on their prayers. Even, in fact, the weather in Plachnik. And our Shmuel is one of the 36, cried the butcher. Oh, what good fortune that he should be living here in Plachnik, said the baker. Let's go find him and tell the world that he lives here, said the candlestick maker. Plachnik will become famous, announced the rich man. Travelers will come to see him, and maybe our town will make money. People rushed to the cobbler shop. There they found Shmuel's tools and the shoes that he had fixed and polished and left without charging for owners. But Shmuel was gone. If you are one of the 36 Lamed Vavniks, it must remain a secret. If anyone discovers who you really are, you'll lose your powers, your special powers. And that is part of being a Lamed Vavnik. No one in Plachnik ever found out where poor Shmuel went. Someone saw him in Vilna digging ditches. Someone spotted him begging outside the gates of Jerusalem. Someone saw him in New York, where he had a junk shop. And someone saw him in your town, fixing your shoes and forgetting to charge you. A few months after Shmuel left, a new cobbler came to Plachnik. His name was Yaakov, and he was poor, but no one called him poor, stupid Yaakov. Everyone was kind to him. After all, you never know. As Francine Pro's comments, added up the number of candles we light in the menorah during Hanukkah totals 36. A reminder meant to rekindle our faith in the Lamed Vavniks. The fact that in the merit of these 36, God preserves the whole world. And that is the paradigm of divine justice. So I would like to thank all of you for accompanying me in these 4 episodes in Jewish art. I want to especially thank the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, and my warmest thanks to Sidney Yeager, Senior Public Programs Producer. And next Sunday, December 14th, is the first night of Hanukkah. Remember to light, because every light counts, and because you never know. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was such a beautiful note to end on. And I really appreciate you sharing all of these works with us, and for all four of these lectures that you've given over the past couple of months.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure. Absolutely a pleasure.
So,
Uh,
so these are, yeah, such beautiful works. And for those of you who have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And we will get to as many as we can uh, 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 as we go through. So I want to start with a question that came in. You know, why put Podwal and Spiegelman in conversation with each other? They're such different art types. They are very different artists. So what do you think the merits are of putting them in conversation with each other?
okay, well, initially, the first two, meaning Lamentations and Mouse, was a lecture that I gave a number of years ago, and it had to do with, I'm trying to remember now, it was during the days of mourning. I'm trying to remember now, it was actually right before Rosh Hashanah, and where we contemplate these things. And so the subjects really reverberated with the kinds of introspection that you do in terms of coming into Rosh Hashanah. Also, if I remember correctly, it may have very been also been right before Tisha B'Av. So it was in the subject. Um, and when the museum chose these two, it seems to me that I didn't really focus on the fact that, oh my goodness, this is going to be the end. And so we have to do something else about it. So I looked around, and I've got lots of books by Mark Podwal, and by many other artists, of course. But this book I came across, and I read it. It brought tears to my eyes. And I suddenly thought, you know what? Jewish art covers a lot of different things. And this is one of the more serious aspects of it, having to do with the Book of Lamentations and illustrations for that and Mouse, but it also covers joyous things and measures of hope. And so these two seem to almost naturally speaking to each other.
Thank you. So from Podwal, you showed us kind of two very different works of his,
Yes.
Lamentations. We started out with a very angry piece of his, especially, and
Right.
then ended with this really beautiful, children's book, but is really like a story that all of us can learn from. So what do you think makes Podwal such a versatile artist that he can kind of go from such an angry piece to this kind of really beautiful story?
Mark Podwal, who I had the honor and pleasure of knowing for many years, um, uh, uh, this is a man who lived in these texts.
Mhm.
He knew Judaism deeply. Uh, he he lived it in his art, and hence, so to him, this wasn't a reach at all. I was surprised by the anger in the Lamentations, uh, this book of his, and let's see here, right? And to give you an example, you see this, right? I mean, here he's got the arch, and this is on AICA, right? And a noose. There was an anger and a piece of him that I'd never really seen before. He always took tragedy seriously, but here it's early on in his career, and he's known as being a righteous person in terms of his illustrations. And so for him, there was no limit to what actually Jewish text and Jewish knowledge could be. And so for him, I wasn't surprised at all that he could go from one extreme to the other, as I see here in these two pieces.
Thank you. And some from sort of the first lecture that you gave about the birth of Jewish art to now, I think Mouse is kind of one of the more recent works that we've looked at in this series. What do you think, like, if you kind of had to characterize it down? I know this is sort of a big question, but what do you think sort of characterizes Jewish art kind of through all of those movements and different things?
Jewish text. Jewish text is very simple. Jewish art is not defined by who does it, it's defined by the subject. And the subject is the Jewish text and Jewish life also, frankly, and the vicissitudes of it. And so it's really, that's the why I do it. I do
Mhm.
it because it is so much about a lived experience, and that and the kinds of artists that do it are ones who want to really roll up their sleeves and get into the thick of human experience that happens to be seen through Jewish eyes and Jewish life. And so that's what's so vibrant about it, and that's what brings it together. And also that will be the future of it.
And I think that's actually, thank you for providing an excellent segue to the next question. Uh, I think I've asked you a similar question to this before, but are there artists that you see working now that are sort of the future of Jewish art that you think people should know about?
I think I've mentioned this before. So there's an organization that I'm part of called the Jewish Art Salon,
Mhm.
jewishartsalon.org. Just go to that, and there's many listings of contemporary Jewish artists, all of whom are working in a great variety of different subjects and concentrations. That's the future of Jewish art. Those things. There's also another organization called the Jewish Artists Initiative in California. There's another organization, I'm forgetting their name, in Chicago. Uh, Jewish artists are working very hard, continuing this idea. But the core idea, as I mentioned perhaps before, well, I said that it's all about Jewish content, but it's
Mhm.
also about a certain phrase, and that is Jewish art. Lots of artists who are Jewish, who do wonderful work, don't use that phrase. They say Jewish themed art, or they say, oh, I'm not a Jewish artist, I'm just an artist. We need to change that because just like there's such a thing as Italian art, there's such a thing as Black art, there's such a thing as Hispanic art. All of these things are legitimate within the critical universe and the universe of people actually doing something they believe in. What Jews need to do, Jewish artists especially, is understand that there is something called Jewish artist or Jewish art, and that is an exciting way to be an artist and to create.
Thank you. And somebody mentioned in the chat the American Guild of Judaic Artists. That might be.
Yes, yes. I actually helped found that many years ago. Oh yeah, sure.
Oh.
Their emphasis that by and large they think of themselves, I believe, at least they certainly used to, as craftspeople, people who do Judaica, which is totally legitimate, but I think it is different in kind. When someone is making, I mean, obviously, some Judaica can rise to being art, right? And I've done that myself. But there is a distinction, at least in my mind, between making a work of art and the only purpose of it is to communicate Jewish ideas
Mhm.
and a Jewish story, and Judaica, which purpose is for really a practical purpose, a mezuzah to put up on your door or a menorah to light on a Sunday evening.
Mhm. Thank you. And also, so another question that we had come in, which is it's kind of relating between the last lecture, which was the radical camera, and this one. Um, in the radical camera, we talked a lot about how they were very socially justice minded, and they were using their works to bring attention to social issues. Do you see that in Podwal and Spiegelman? And if so, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Podwal, definitely. Podwal is also famous for the op-ed pages that he used to draw for the New York Times, and which very much motivated to bring people's consciousness about Israel, not so much, quote, ordinary Jewish concerns, but concerns about Israel and Soviet Jews, etc. So he was very, very important, very much engaged in that kind of social consciousness. I would say Maus is engaged in social consciousness, but it's of a different kind. If you're at all aware, the 20th century for a Jew is defined by the creation of the state of Israel and the Holocaust.
Mhm.
Now, there's lots of other things, but these are definitions that a Jew certainly needs to confront. And so there's a social consciousness in Maus, even though it doesn't seem that way, but it really is, especially in terms of his complexity of, quote, memory And how do we preserve memory and an event that we need to carry forward, as I said in my closing remarks? So even Mouse has a social consciousness aspect.
Great. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat, and we can't end with the question that I normally ask you, which is what are
No?
you next? But I do want to end with one final question, which we did get in your bio, kind of where can we find you and things that you're working on. But could you tell us maybe if you're working on anything new and just reiterate where people can find you and where they can look at your really excellent works?
Thank you. So I guess it's kind of two things. I'm currently in an exhibition with about 27 other artists in the Philadelphia Museum of Jewish Art. And it's been up through from September, it's up through March, and that is called Fallout. And it's focused on October 7th and the new anti-Semitism. So there's actually have four paintings in that show, and there's many other really tremendous paintings there. And you should look it up. Actually, the Jewish Art Salon has a link of that exhibition, which then has the catalog, and you can look at those works there. Also, God willing, I will be in something called the Jerusalem Biennial, which will be in Jerusalem, many different locations around Jerusalem. Evidently, I believe it's in May, and I have six large paintings in that exhibition. They have to get to Israel first, and they are on they are they are on the Binding of Isaac. They are on the Binding of Isaac, and it's basically it is about the father-son relationship between Abraham and Isaac, and they're large paintings. Each painting is 6 by 5 feet, and so that's an exhibition that if you're in Israel, you can certainly catch it. It will be in Jerusalem again. I don't know exactly where. Let's see here. That's really mainly it. And also, these lectures I've been able to give, and I've given any another number of lectures, are also now getting up on YouTube. And it's another place where my work is in writing, also frequently put into the lectures.
Thank everyone who tuned in this evening and also for all of the previous lectures. If you enjoyed today's program, we hope you'll consider making a donation to support the museum at mjhnyc.org/support, and also joining us for our upcoming programs, which you can find at mjhnyc.org/current events. Have a great night, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks. You too.